Hello, welcome to RC Video Reviews. Today we're taking a look at the brand new GX12 from Radiomaster. Before we get started, I need to let you know this video is sponsored by Radiomaster, who sent me this GX12 for review. If you'd like to pick one of these radios up, I'll have an affiliate link in the description. Feel free to use that, and if you do, just be aware the channel gets a little bit of a kickback, but it doesn't cost you anything extra. That kickback is paid by Radiomaster. In this video, I'll show you what comes in the box with the GX12, and I'll give you a tour of the radio. We'll cover features, specifications. I did a little bit of a Q&A with Radiomaster. We'll cover that. I'll show you how to install the customizable switches, and we'll open the radio up and take a look inside. Let's get started. In the box, you get the GX12 radio, and you also get a very nice carrying case. I really like these Radiomaster carrying cases for my transmitters. I use them for every radio I bring to the field. In addition to the carrying case and the radio, you also get a few spare parts. There are a couple of plugs with a hex wrench and some extra springs for gimbals. There are a couple of switches. I'll show you how we'll use these a little bit later. There's a little screen protector if you want to add that to the screen. That just covers up right there. You get two switch plates that allow you to customize the top of the radio. It's a very cool feature. I can't wait to show that to you. And of course, you get a USB-C cable for plugging the radio into the computer and for charging it. And finally, you'll get an 18650 battery tray. The production units do not come with 18650 batteries. You'll have to source those yourself. Next up, we'll take a look at the radio. The first thing that jumps off the page to you should be this top-mounted screen. I'm really excited to see that. I've been wanting a top-mounted screen on my radio for a long time, so 2 thumbs up to Radiomaster for including top-mounted options. This one is a monochrome OLED screen, so black and white. On the top of the radio, on the left-hand side, we've got an SE switch, which is 3-position. We've got an SB switch, which is also 3-position. The SG switch is a momentary switch. That is not a latching momentary, just a regular momentary switch. And then you've got a pot over here, similar to the slider on the TX16S. Nothing on the side here. We just have the pot up here on the top. On the right-hand side, we've got an SF switch, which is 3-position. Got an SC switch, which is 3-position. You've got the S2 slider right here, and excellent center detent. I know that was an issue on the early Radiomaster models. This one, you don't have that problem. Excellent center detent on this one. And you have an SH switch, which is also a momentary switch. To wrap up the top of the radio, there is a 3.5mm headphone jack. Notice the single USB port on this one. No USB port on the bottom. That USB port is there to charge the radio and provide all of your connectivity. So mounting the internal storage, joystick, and flashing the internal Express LRS, all done through a single USB port. Very nice. And then a trainer port right there on the left-hand side. Also pay attention to the ventilation up top. That's for the advanced cooling system to keep those 1-watt transmitters nice and cool inside. And the handle is this fabric handle screwed into the back with 4 screws. Feels very durable. I don't have any issues with that. And it will collapse down nicely for storage in a backpack or your storage case. On the front of the radio, you'll notice something new here. We've got customizable buttons. So these are a 6-position switch, but it's very customizable. I'll show you a little bit about using those later on in the video. We've got the power button, 4 trim switches. So you've got T1, T2, T3, T4, and the same 4-button navigation that we have on all other Radiomaster radios. I really do applaud them for sticking to that standard, because once you learn it, you don't have to relearn a new button configuration on the front of a radio. So I like that they've done that quite a bit, even on these smaller form factors. We also have 2 more pots on the bottom, P1 and P2. So you can use those in your configuration however you want. And then the system button here on the left and the model button here on the right. And then finally, we've got an SA button here and an SD button here. The SA button is a momentary switch. The SD button is a momentary switch, but I have it on good authority. There'll be some added functionality in a future firmware, so keep an eye on that. On the back of the radio, we'll talk about the RF tech. This is an Express LRS transmitter. This has got dual 1-watt Gemini crossband transmitters. Very cool stuff. Simultaneous dual band transmission capabilities. This radio also has folding antennas, so when you're ready to go fly, you can prop those up and kind of aim those wherever you need them to be. And then there are 2 plugs right here on the back. These are DIY SMA ports. Radiomaster will have SMA kits available, so you can utilize those to put any kind of antenna configuration on there that you'd like to have. So those holes are pre-drilled and ready for modifications and upgrades right there. Continuing on the back, we've got a nano module. So if you want to add some kind of external RF tech, you can do that. Here's a look at the battery cover. I'll slide that down. You can see the 18650 batteries fit in there just fine. And if I pull this off, you'll notice something missing in this radio. No SD card slot. That's because they built in the memory on this one. It's got a 512 megabyte internal memory module, so no more SD cards to fiddle around with. One of the first things I noticed when I picked this radio up is it's got a very different feel on the plastic. This is a hydrophobic PCB coating. It's designed to handle extremes, hot temperatures, sun, humidity, the works. So Radiomaster says this will be a very durable coating out there in the field. The gimbals on this radio are something special. We'll talk a little bit about the specifications in a few moments, but I wanted to show you some physical attributes on this one first. The sticks fold, and the way they fold is you have to pull them, you pull them straight up, and then you just kind of put your finger in there and hold that gimbal still and fold it over, and you can lay those gimbals down. Isn't that nice? That lets you store it in your backpack without getting caught up on things that are in your bag. And that works on both gimbals, by the way. So there you go. Both of the gimbal sticks are now full in their folded position. You also have a couple of screws that allow you to adjust the upper and lower angle travel between 38 and 60 degrees. So that screw there and that screw there, if you turn them clockwise, the angle becomes smaller. If you turn them counterclockwise, that increases the angle. And that's true on both gimbals. On the back of the radio, there are two slots labeled LR, one on the right-hand side and one on the left-hand side. That allows you to change the radio between mode 1 and mode 2. Turn the screw clockwise to disable self-centering, and you turn it counterclockwise to enable self-centering. There are a couple of up and down arrows and sideways arrows embossed in the case. Those indicate tension adjustments. So if you want to change the tension for up and down or side to side, you can do that in the corresponding slot indicated by the arrow embossed in the case. And that's true on both sides of the radio. So on the right-hand side, here are the two slots for tension. And then finally, under the battery cover, there's a throttle stick tension adjustment. Turn this one clockwise to increase throttle tension and turn it counterclockwise to decrease the tension. Let's talk about specifications. At launch, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. But knowing Radiomaster, I'm sure they'll have some customization options in the pipeline soon. This radio weighs about 573 grams. Dimensions, it's 183 millimeters wide by 148 tall, 78 millimeters thick, and it weighs 573 grams. This is a 2.4 and sub-G 900 megahertz radio transmitter running the Express LRS protocol. Dual folding, dual band omnidirectional antennas. The RF power is up to 1,000 watts, dual 1,000 watts, dual band, cross band Express LRS. The voltage range is 6.6 to 8.4 volts DC. The current draw is between 390 to 1,000 milliamps or 1 amp depending on your RF output. Radio firmware is EdgeTX, of course, and the Express LRS firmware is by Express LRS. 16 channels max. The battery is a 7.4 volt nominal, 2-cell lithium polymer. Two 3.7 18650s will do the trick. No batteries included. You got to buy your own. Charging is provided by a 2S smart balancing circuit on the motherboard. Single USB connectivity, which we talked about. The display is 128 by 64 monochrome OLED. These gimbals are referred to as GX01 gimbals. So that's a new model number from Radiomaster. They're 1000 hertz, digital, and 12-bit capable. EdgeTX isn't ready for 12-bit just yet, but the gimbals are. So when EdgeTX gets there, the hardware will be ready for the Edge team. The gimbal sticks are 3 millimeters, so if you're interested in your own stick ends, 3 millimeter is your number. The external module is a nano configuration, so Crossfire is compatible, of course. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, internal 512 megabytes of integrated flash. Next up is my question and answer session with Radiomaster. The first thing I asked is, hey, can I swap in AG01s? And the answer is no. The GX12 comes with G01s. You're not going to want to switch, and you can't. They have a different shape and a different interface. So that brought up my next question. Well, tell me about the GX01 gimbals. The gimbals, as I mentioned, are digital and run up to 1000 hertz, and they're 12-bit capable. So when EdgeTX gets there, the gimbals will be ready. Edge TX Sync is a new feature that enables the 1000 hertz refresh rate, and it only applies to the GX12. The gimbals are CNC and ball bearing construction, and as I mentioned, folding sticks. Kind of a neat little party trick to fold those sticks over like that, right? If you travel with a backpack and you need to carry your radio in a bag like that, that's a very nice party trick. I asked Radiomaster, what's the story on the included firmware? I'm not a big fan of firmware not developed and tested by Edge TX. Thankfully, the answer was that the firmware on the GX12 is built and tested by the Edge TX team. 2 thumbs up for me on that one. There was a mention in the notes about the integration of the 6-position switches and the SA and SD switches. In my inspection, I couldn't find a linkage, so I asked about it, and the answer was there'll be expanded capability on the SA and SD switches in the next firmware. I opened the case up and I saw a UART connector that's not accessible with the back cover in place, and I asked what that was for, and the answer was that's an aux UART for any internal mod you want to make, like adding a receiver for a trainer. There's also a hall UART, and that's for factory settings. When I take the radio apart, I'll show you the next subject. I'll give you a look at it when we're inside. But I noticed some of the screws have a indicator with a circle and a line through them, and I asked what that was about. The answer was those screws should not be removed unless you're replacing a gimbal or doing maintenance. If those screws are removed, the position of the magnet in the middle of the gimbal and the 3D Hall sensor on the PCB will change, and you'll have to recalibrate, which can be done with a downloadable app. Next up, I'm going to show you how to change these customizable switches on the top. I think this is one of the really cool features. They're kind of like modular switches. So if for whatever reason you decide, I don't want all these switches up here, or I don't want that S1 pot there, Radiomaster made it really easy to do something about it. So I'm going to turn the radio off. All I did was use my 1.5 mil driver, loosen those 2 screws, and when we pull that apart, there's one little ribbon connector right here. We're just going to loosen that from the module, and there we go. It's that easy to get the switches out. Now, if we want to change the switches, we simply disconnect these connectors that are on the circuit board, one there and one here. And then we'll remove these 2 screws holding this little PCB onto the switch cover. So there's one, take that off. You want to take note, you see that little circle right there? That circle goes on the post of the switch cover, all right? Just keep that in mind when it's time to put it back together. Okay, that's 2 screws. And then we can separate the circuit board just like that from the switch cover. Now, I'm not going to actually change the toggle switch because it's a brain dead easy thing to do. In the package, you get a couple of spares. So one is a 2-position switch and one is a momentary switch. So if you want to use one of those switches on any of these switch panels, you can do it. All you've got to do is remove that nut, drop the switch out, and put the new one in. Very simple to do. But I do want to focus a little bit on the circuit board because the circuit board needs to go back in. And if you want to change to one of the other switch covers, you'll notice there's no slot for that wheel right here. So in order to get that circuit board to fit, you've got to put that wheel in the center position, and then you just slide it off the post. Very carefully, just slide it off the post. And once you have that removed, then you're free to install the circuit board on the switch plate that blanks out the pot. And we'll do that. Remember what I told you about the circles? These are the posts that I was referring to. So you just put those circles right on top of that post, just like that. You'll see the SG button pop through. Your toggle switches will pop through these holes. And then all you have to do is reconnect your switches on the back and put those 2 screws right back in those ring circles and reinstall the board in your radio. And to revert to the factory condition, just reverse the process. Put the plastic knurled knob back on there. Just slide that in and make sure it clears the slot. And mine does. Reinstall the circuit board. reconnect the switch connectors to the circuit board. Plug the radio harness back in and then reinstall back in the radio. And of course, before you go flying, you'll need to reconfigure Edge TX to account for the hardware changes you just made. In my case, I didn't change the hardware, so I'm just going to verify operation. There's SE working, there's SB working through 3 positions. There's my pot, that looks good. And then I've got my SG momentary switch over there on the left, that's working fine as well. So I'm happy with that. Next up, we'll open the radio and take a look inside. Now, I've already removed the side grips, but very easy to do that. Just get your finger right under there and just lift them out on both sides. I had to remove them to show you how to adjust the gimbals. Take the battery cover off, take the battery out if you have one, and then it's just 4 screws. You'll need a 2mm driver, and the 4 screws are just located on the corners. So here's the first screw right here. 1 screw down here on the bottom left. And the same on the right hand side, same positions, right here on the top right hole underneath the grip and the bottom right. Once you've removed those 4 screws, carefully remove the case and say goodbye to your warranty sticker. We're not going to need that. Get rid of that guy. And then don't pull too hard because there is a harness you have to disconnect. This is what brings the external module to the motherboard. So just carefully get your hands on that plastic connector and rock that back and forth until it's separated. And there you go. I'm also going to fold these gimbal sticks over so I can lay the radio down. That's handy. There we go. Here's a look at the motherboard. There's the battery connector, and there's a little reset button. Not exactly sure what that does. I'll find out about it, and I'll post a video update on that at some other time. There's the battery. This is a CR1220. And check out the cooling system on the Express LRS module. They went all out on this one. It's got the heatsink, the active cooling, it's all there. On the right-hand side, there's the Hall UART I mentioned earlier. Here's the auxiliary UART that I mentioned earlier as well. This is the one that you can use for, say, a trainer module if you want. On the left-hand side, there's our external RF connector that we had to disconnect when we took the back cover off. Right here on the left, there are 2 connectors. One says horn and one says cooler. That horn is either going to be the haptic motor or the speaker. Not sure which one, but it's going to be one or the other. And these are the tensioning springs for the gimbals. You don't have to take the cover off. Remember, you can get to these from the back of the radio with the cover in place. Now I told you there were a couple of screws in here that have a little indicator with a circle and a line through them. Here's an example of one right here. Those are the ones you do not want to take out because they have the potential to cause your gimbals to go out of calibration. So unless you really know what you're doing and you really want to mess around with calibrating gimbals, leave those alone. To reassemble the radio, just make sure you connect that external ribbon to the motherboard, just like that. Make sure that's seated in there. And then just fold the back cover right on top of the radio. And you can screw things back together, 4 screws. To put the grips back on, start with the side that's got the 5 small tabs and insert those into the radio first. Just get those seated in there and then just work your way around to the front and get everything kind of mashed back down in there until it fits right. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Finally, we'll open our sticks back up. Just make sure it powers back on.
Welcome to Edge TX. Throttle warning. Switch warning.
And we're back in business. Before we wrap this one up, I told you I'd show you a little bit of information about the 6-position switch and the customization options. I've got switch number 1 is lit up in pink, and switch number 2 is lit up in blue. Let me show you how to configure that and what options you have. You press the model button and press page right 1 time, and you scroll down right there to customizable switches and hit that little down arrow, and that's where you get into this configuration area. So in switch number 1, that's highlighted right here. If I click on that, I can give that a name if I want. So I can click on this field and give it a name and identify what that switch is. We can also change the configuration of that switch from a 2 position to a toggle and back to a 2 position, which is kind of cool. On the right hand side, you can add this switch to a group. The idea behind grouping is you can manage their behavior during the boot process. So you can say, for example, all switches in group 1 should be turned on, for example. But if I don't want to group my switches, I can just set that to a dash. And then you notice one more option appears over here on the right-hand side. The equal sign means use the last state when the radio was turned off. If you If you set it to the up arrow, that starts off. If you set this last option on the right to be an up arrow, that will start the switch in the off position when the radio is turned on or that model is selected. And if you use the down arrow, it'll start the radio or that model in the on position. So switch number 2 is set to blue. And that's why when I turn the radio on, my switch number 1 is pink or off, and my switch number 2 is blue or on. I'll turn the radio off and we'll just prove that out real quick.
Welcome to HTX.
There's pink, there's blue. And if we look at our switch config, the radio starts with switch number 1 off, which is indicated by the color pink. And it starts with switch 2 on, down arrow, which is indicated by the blue light. Everybody asks about sound levels and volume on these radios. I can tell you that this one, welcome to HTX. I don't think it's a massive improvement over any other radio. So it's not like you're going to get blown away with the volume on this one. It's similar to all the other Radiomaster products. That wraps up my first look at the Radiomaster GX12. Thanks to Radiomaster for sending this unit out for review. I'll remind you, I have an affiliate link in the description if you'd like to pick one up for yourselves when they become available retail, which should be soon. If you like this kind of content, make sure you smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know new videos hit the channel. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy and go fly something.